I was particularly excited about this episode because you have this incredible career being a founder of Synima, a renowned business in video production and animation. And on the other hand, you're certified a psychotherapist, helping people deal with trauma and addiction.
Yes.
So I believe for many of our listeners, that might be not quite obvious how these two paths intersect. So if you could walk us through, I'd really appreciate that.
Wow. All right. So the broad brushstrokes are done, and it's great to talk to you. And I'm really looking forward to this. That the two paths are that I start. My father was an actor, so he was a physically large American guy. He was in Fawlty Towers and Empire Strikes Back, and so I went into film and TV and radio. And I was doing radio plays as both as an English person as also as an American as well, because I can do the accent quite quickly. So I was doing that too. And then I got into camera work at the BBC and worked on Top of the Pops and National Lottery and Noel's House Party and those things. And then I set up Synima in year 2000, and Synima grew and grew and grew to where we are today. Twin track. My father's sister was Marion Woodman, who was a Jungian analyst in Canada, and one of the leading authorities at the time on anorexia nervosa. She did a number of books, The Pregnant Virgin and Addiction to Perfection, and I was very close to her, and I've always had a really keen interest in psychology. I mean, all of these books behind me are all psychology books. I'm in that chair at 5:30 in the morning reading, psychology. And while initially I was trying to make a living being a psychotherapist, and I had private practice and I was working with employee assistance programs, the creative world of video and animation started to call to me. And I set up the production company, and that grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. It's a fairy story, which we can get into in a bit. It was only really when animation became quite, I wouldn't say cheap, but reasonable to produce, that suddenly the application for animation in mental health really struck me. And we can come on to that. But we've also got, there's using metaphor and allegories as animations, creating them as animations to talk to people, especially children and young adults. And there's also the platform, which means at the moment that everything is free to air. Basically, if you produce an animation, it goes straight up onto Instagram. Whereas before it had to go out on air and television. So typically in an advert, the media spend is 2/3 of the production spend, but not anymore. And so my thinking was, and still is, if we can produce really good peer-reviewed animations that deal with anger, OCD, trauma, addiction, depression, and we can really speak to people when they need to hear it.
You mentioned a few quite interesting topics. I'd like maybe to elaborate a little bit more.
Oh, sure.
Well, first thing that really strikes me is about your aunt, who was the Jungian analyst. And many might think, she was a psychologist, but it's being Jungian analyst, it's not, like, I don't know, TikTok psychology, right? It's something much, much deeper. On one hand, your dad was a well-known actor performing in some pop movies. And on the other hand, your aunt was one of the top psychologists. So this probably had a lot of impact on you. And now you see the way to combine your skills and your past experience into giving back to the community. You see there is a niche and need for your skills. How does specifically animation can help with surfacing the trauma? Because very often person would not be even be able to recognize that they had traumatic experience or they are living through traumatic experience.
Oh.
What does this animation help, and in which ways it can help?
With specific regard to trauma, animation can help in the diagnosis and the treatment and psychoeducation around it. So just to try and keep it brief, what happens with trauma is that somebody experiences a traumatic incident. Let's call it a road traffic accident. The great thing about trauma is you're dealing usually with normal people who are caught in an extraordinary situation. unlike something like addiction or depression, where um, there's an underlying issue. This is a traumatic situation or an object that's happened, and it has completely overwhelmed them. And what happens when people are overwhelmed is they become literally lost for words. They cannot process it using an internal narrative, and they cannot process it um, to somebody. So what happens if you can't process internally? Your body takes over. So the Van der Kolks did a book about this. The body knows the score. So what does it do? It creates flashbacks, not just visual flashbacks, not just waking in the middle of the night with a cold sweat. Olfactory flashbacks, a certain smell reminds you of something. Auditory flashbacks, a bang goes and suddenly, if you're in the military, you duck. Um, and so how do you reach that person? Because the first thing they do is they think I'm going mad. And if the first time I meet somebody with trauma, they'd say to me, I think I'm going mad. And the answer to that is you're not. What you're doing is you're self-regulating, and your body is trying to process something you cannot articulate to yourself or to anybody else. The first thing I need to do to you is tell you you're not going mad. These are absolutely prototypical symptomatic responses to what you've been through. And Donna, the relief just flows out of them. And it's like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank. And then you get to the trauma. Well, the trauma is because they are unable to process it. The way to get through to that is to well, there's a number of ways of using video and animation. One way to do it is to take them through what they call the Mitchell 7-point plan, which was developed by the British military, and to take them through exactly what happened, and to that end you can use video and animation there. Now, you can't use video because, say, for example, you showed somebody a video of a car accident. You're likely to trigger them, which is not what you want to do. But you can show them an animation of it and use that within the therapeutic relationship to help them self-reflect. Now, what animation does, and anybody who's got children knows this, if you sit a child in front of an animation, they get lost into some dream world, a world of surreal myths and allegories, and where their cognitive function, the prefrontal cortex, just suspends itself as the information goes in. And that is the way to get through to somebody who they will start to be able to self-regulate using the animation. We can use an animation to provide a narrative that helps them readjust to the world and to put that traumatic incident into some sort of perspective, so it's not overwhelming and that they can live with it. Now, that we get on to another subject there about living with it, but because you can't ever take it away, but it won't have that catastrophic force, that traumatic force that it previously had. The other thing it does is an animation you can show to people around that person so that they can share the narrative that the client has got as a way of so that they can be more supportive in that environment. Does that all make sense? Sorry.
It does. Yeah. I do understand about this one incident, like one traumatic incident that it's really hard to process. It can be even if you take them circumstances of family abuse or violence, when the small child sees, I don't know, dad hit mom or something.
Yeah.
Like that. So there's one incident.
Yeah.
And it's something that you can help process and help the child understand that it's not their fault, right? That they had nothing to do with that. It's not them being bad, etc. But there can be circumstances, it's like not one thing, but it's like kind of the entire environment is chaotic. It's something that, like you cannot make sense of it.
Yes.
I do see this as a quite challenging to surface it and help the child understand what they are going to, maybe give them the language or the images. How would you approach that?
Well, there's lots of ways that video and animation can approach that. I mean, one way, I work a lot with NACOA, which is the National Association of Children of Alcoholics, and there are 25 children call their helpline every year, and what is heartrending is that 10% roughly of those children call to have a bedtime story read to them. And those children that call in on the helpline, they speak to a member of NACOA who can talk to them and say, again, your situation is one of 24,999 others of children who've watched mom and dad knock each other about or are drunk upstairs, and then help them to situate that in a narrative for themselves. And obviously, broad brushstrokes here.
What should I do?
You don't have to face it alone. 1 in 5 children in the UK are affected by parents drinking. Animation, and we produced an animation, and I'll provide it to you and to your listeners, anybody wants it. We produced an animation this Christmas which advertised the helpline, and it went out to tell children who are all going to be on social media, look, if this is happening to you, get in touch. You're not alone. Because it's that you're not alone is the start of where shame comes in. Why am I unloved? Or where a sense of lack of validation comes in. Why does mommy prefer vodka over me? And the hyper arousal, hyper awareness that a child has, where they're reading the room all the time, hyper, is the difference between getting hit and getting a hug, and that's not normal. But to that child, it is normal. They've grown up within that. And so animation can very gently, using hand-drawn animation, like Walt Disney, we can recreate Walt Disney, or his airbrush animation style, which happens to be a personal favorite of mine. And walk them through that, and have it peer reviewed so that healthcare professionals are signing off on this at every stage, so that what's being said is professionally accurate and as supportive as it can be to the person that watches it. It's a way of answering your question. Does that?
It does, absolutely. It does explain the situation. I know that you talk from very personal experience.
Yes.
You, despite, I as I told you, I was preparing for this interview. I've read some of your posts and also watched the other videos, and I know that your dad had the substance like alcohol abuse, right?
Yeah.
So is this something that you kind of personal went through, and you would probably appreciate having
Yeah.
his kind of resources to help you out?
Yeah, my understanding of, I've been sober for 12 years, but I got into a very dark place where, the tail started to wag the dog as far as alcohol was concerned. So my father was an alcoholic. He got dry in 1970. And so I was raised with years of him being an alcoholic. So he was at one remove from me. He wasn't parenting at all. His relationship was to whiskey. It wasn't to me. And my mother was going out to work in order to put the roof over all our heads, so she was unavailable. And so we were just. So I do think that the children of alcoholics, what we call COAs, children of alcoholics, have got a particular sense of themselves and their environment, and they have that particular type of hypervigilance. They're always looking. I say that clinical evidence, it's around, but I'm just going to go from it. Whenever I speak to somebody who is a child of an alcoholic, there's a resonance there. And I'm sure your listeners, some of them are just nodding their heads at me. Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. My dad was an alcoholic as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you probably know a lot of people. Like it's fascinating. It strikes kind of how many people we know, like in our environment, that kind of are victims who grew up in this kind of environment. I do know that I am like hyper vigilant. I can read emotions like once I enter a room, and so I used to think that this is kind of special gift I have, being able, but I didn't know this is trauma. This gift that I never asked for, right, is something that came with traumatic experiences. Good that we learn how to process this, and even when we grow older, it's good that we we recognize these kind of patterns and try to maybe not scan and not to see something that is not there, you know.
Yes, to a point, I think what happens is what can happen is that hypervigilance comes through into every single area of life. So people are constantly, the cortisol's going all the time, and they're constantly looking around, and they're frightened that if they aren't anxious, that something's going to happen, and that's and of course with that, and here we get into another element. If you're hyper anxious all the time, what are you going to do in order to completely relax? Have a drink, you know. And that's, I think, part of the recurring pattern. I mean, I don't want to get into it clinically, but there is such a high incidence of children of alcoholics turning to booze themselves in order to, because it's learned behavior, right? I mean,
It is, yes. But on the other side, like I will tell you that I do like I consider like it's not that I would never drink, wine or any other alcohol drink, but I do believe that I kind of control myself is
yeah,
only on celebration and other stuff. So, do you believe that the children who were raised in the families where one of the parents or both parents were alcohol, they are more prone to
yeah.
becoming
The clinical evidence would seem to support that. I mean, I would say that. I mean, it's impossible for me because I mean I can sit in an AA meeting and they're all saying, well, my parents were drunks. So there you got 100%. But clinically, it would seem to be the case that statistically, if you're more likely to have a drink problem if your parents had a drink problem. That's a gift that they hand down to you. Um, but I'm gonna pick you up on special power because I do think it's a special power. I think that you know that if you've learned to navigate that tough childhood environment, you are equipped in a way to handle a lot of other things that life throws at you.
yeah, it can be kind of blessing and that like but no, I do believe that we sometimes need to let our guards down. But there are, like if you grew in this kind of an environment, there would be a lot more adding up. So as you said, like mom had to work like double shift and she would not be there. So like all of these they add up, and then suddenly you realize it's not only this kind of chaotic environment at home where dad is not available because he's addicted, but because like a lot more was happening. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd rather not have this talent, but it is what it is, you see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. But also, let's put it into context time-wise. I mean, here we are in 2026. It's less than 100 years since alcoholism, well, obviously booze has always been around. But I think what's really exciting in the last sort of 10 years, it's been called a decade of the brain for a reason, is because we have MRIs, because we understand dopamine pathways, because we understand more about addiction than we ever have done. And we're not as blind as we were. And some of the questions about, well, is booze a disease, addiction a disease, or is it a moral failing? We can throw a bit more light on that, and a lot more understanding. Although strangely, not a lot of understanding. I think people still feel that alcoholics are a little bit worse than some other people. There's a sense that they have a volition around it, which they absolutely don't.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say. That for alcohol been there for centuries, right? It was kind of normalized toxin of daily lives. It's like in certain cultures, I believe alcohol is a huge part of British culture, right? We see pubs on every corner of
Yeah.
the street, right? It's like for foreigners like me, it's a fascinating thing to see people, standing, drinking, having fun, and it's something that looks like a great and fun. You would like to be part of that because like socializing, and maybe it's not about alcohol, but it's about this human connection. You see people, it's like kind of I don't know, that the path to connect with others. So that is one thing. And but we do recognize like that alcohol is evil, it's ruining lives, it has impacts, like on the health and other things. But there are, you mentioned it's 2026, and do you think there are other addictions that have that the new ones, like, I don't know, addiction to social media, scrolling, parents might be as unavailable, doing, like doom scrolling as if they are drinking. So what's your take on that?
Right. Addiction, I think, comes in many forms. I think the latest one is mobile phones. I think if we go back to, no, can I just turn around here? There's a book. Um, this this book for me is really says it all. It's by a woman called Anna Lemke, Dopamine Nation, which says as clearly as I've ever heard it said that the science behind addiction, these dopamine pathways, and the dopamine pathways, the reward system, can be triggered by anything. And mobile phones, I think, and social media is absolutely, it's like fentanyl. You get into it and it grabs you. It doesn't let you go. And I think, I'm a big fan of Tristan Harris and CHD and I don't think mobile phones are a great thing. I really think that they shouldn't be given to anybody, under the age of 12. Certainly not. I don't want to say too much here and get quite cross about it. But yeah, I do think that addiction and mobile phones go hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, because being a parent, I can clearly see, these kind of withdrawal pains. And if I, like, well, Sunday, it was Mother's Day here in UK. In Ukraine, we celebrate in May, but here it was earlier. So my kids, they made me a card and stuff, and I told them that I will take them to a nice place for dinner.
Yeah.
So before we got there, I found a place to park, and then we made the order. We were waiting, and my son, he forgot his phone. And he was, just like, what am I doing here? You are like wasting my time. Well, it's like an hour or up to 2 hours. And he is just like, if he had his phone, he would be a happy, teenager sitting at the table and waiting for the order. Otherwise, I see it's like painful. So I do completely agree with you.
Absolutely. Well, that's what they say. If you don't think you're an alcoholic, take away the drink and see what happens. If you don't think you're addicted, take it away. If then see what happens. How do you feel? And if there's nothing worse than an itch you can't scratch. And if you start itching because it's not there, then there's no more clues. You can kid yourself all day long that you haven't got a problem. Denial.
I'm just curious specifically about the British culture. It's probably, I don't see it, possible to take away just one day closing pubs or, like making that, I don't know how you call this in English, is it like dry law or something that will not lead to good consequences? So what would be your advice? Because you see also in professional life, it's where people connect, it's where the deals are being made, this kind of social environment. So what would be your advice?
Well, I think for a start, talking culturally, the British are emotionally constipated. We 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 find it very difficult. That was Stephen Fry who said that, and I go along with it. We find it very difficult to express emotions, although that does lead to an absolutely blistering sense of humor. So I think it's maybe a price worth paying. I think, well, for starters, I think the generation, my two kids, for example, they drink a lot less than I was when I was their age, and the pub isn't such a meeting place anymore. I mean, you could argue that maybe it's gone online a bit. So my son's playing video games, and my daughter's hanging out at houses rather than. I mean, she's 23. She doesn't go to the pub like girls did, back in the 80s. So I think maybe they're finding a different route. I think the price of alcohol has gone through the roof as well, relative to. I mean, it's £7 a pint now. I mean, it's a lot of money. A round of drinks going to cost 50 quid. Well, one of the challenges that we've got in our culture today is the social contract's being completely torn up. If a flat costs £300,000 and you're going to start with a student loan of at £25,000, you can't afford £7 a pint, or a round of drinks for 50 quid. That's
Yes. But this is probably how people are finding the way out, because I am a frequent traveler to Tenerife. and I see lots of, like there is a pint for euro or €2, and they're like a crowd of people from UK, enjoying their like vacation there. So people are trying to work their lives around, make it easier.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, and there's also the subculture of marijuana as well, which is going up. Strangely, cocaine stayed at £60 a line or a gram for the last 30 years. It's an absolute constant.
Okay, I don't have this data. I will need it.
Well,
How did you know this?
it's out there.
Okay. Yeah, that is absolutely fascinating. The addiction, but I do, so jokes aside, I do believe that the price can actually play a role in reducing,
Yeah,
because as you said, it's like it skyrockets, and it can actually lead to less consumption.
yeah, yeah. It is, and I think maybe one of the things that's happening with people generally is they're becoming more literate around psychology. So if I mention dopamine to my kids, they know what dopamine is. And if I mention what the ego is, or that Trump's a narcissist, or attachment theory. I mean, people are a lot more literate now than they were, and I think probably more sensitive and more likely um, I don't want to use this Americanism, but to call out addictive behavior in their peers than they would otherwise before. Before it would have been maybe a source of shame, but now it's like, I've seen it with my kids actually. They take friends under their arms who they think are maybe behaving a little bit too erratically, or have who maybe don't want to come out because they're smoking dope. It's like, well, what are you doing? We're here. I think people are more psychologically literate than they were even sort of 10 years ago, especially around trauma. I mean, look at trauma and how that's come on as a presenting problem. I mean, it's the number one. I was at a conference last October, run by Araminta Johnson, who is was all about trauma, massive. People like Van der Kolk and Gabor Mate. Prince Harry was generational trauma. I mean, the different sorts of trauma now.
Yeah, the trauma kind of, yeah, that's amazing how much we've learned thanks to social media. So Gabor Mate, like that would be someone who I would listen probably every single video on YouTube, like kind of lectures, etc., because it's something that really, as as we talked about the animation for children, because their prefrontal cord, they cannot have this kind of abstract knowledge, but it allows them to process what they are going through. The thing is with Gabor, his story is really appealing to me, and yeah, so that is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and same with ADHD. I mean, my daughter works with autism very closely at a residential unit in Southwest London, and it's really interesting how thinking around autism and ADHD and what is neurodivergent and what is neurotypical. I mean, that's very plastic at the moment, and it's really interesting with regard to boys and girls, or men and women. How there was a statistic, Dana, the other day. We did a video for University College London on ADHD, and the statistic was that 1 in 4 inmates in a prison has undiagnosed ADHD. 1 in 4, and so let's just sort of do a thought experiment. Somebody's got ADHD. They don't feel normal. They're constantly wired. They start to use substances in order to calm themselves down. So, I mean, ironically, they'll take speed in order to feel normal because, and then they get in trouble with the law, and then they go to prison where they still have undiagnosed ADHD. Now they're an inmate. Now the state is picking up the tab for them to be in prison, incarcerated. They don't want to be there. We're paying a fortune for them to be there. Wouldn't it be great if we just used animation and raised awareness so that we could identify and unmask ADHD in the population upstream, so they're looked after better, and the people around them know what they're dealing with, and and this is what does my head in, Donna, because a series of animations like that wouldn't cost you more than 50 grand, and you could put it out all over the place. Let's say 5 videos, 10 grand a pop, all peer reviewed, all the brightest minds in the field, all talking about different aspects of it. You could put that out, put it on social media, and you raise awareness. And how many problems would you solve, both with the individual and with the cohort and with everybody around them? It'd happen like that. Great.
It is, yes. So you're right about this. Kind of, we penalize people who, who behave differently, who break law, but we don't look deeper what actually caused this kind of behavior, right? So yeah, and it's also, kind of resonates with me with one of the Gabor Mate's video where he talked about, drug um, use and abuse, and when they kind of try to dig deeper into the stories of these people, you could see these extremely traumatic experiences. Very often, like sexual abuse, like all this stuff. So we are punishing people. We are putting them behind bars for something that they maybe didn't have control over. They were born into certain circumstances, and at that time, they didn't have any impact.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. They're caught in the crossfire, and they're living out their lives a way they didn't choose, would never want to, and yet they're being penalized for it. I mean, so raising awareness. How do you raise awareness? Well, video is the way to do it. You could give somebody a pamphlet, but as 1 in 5 people are basically have the literacy of a 7-year-old, and they're totally innumerate. I mean, 1 in 5 people. So animation and video is the way to get through to them, and to raise awareness, and then to send them to support groups, and where they can get more support, or for them to tell their story, and then you get this growing empathy that they all help one another, and we can watch that unfold, and
Yes, well, now AI comes really handy in this kind of process, right? So you can create these, videos, explain complex situations really in a simple way at lower cost. While lots of business owners, the founders, I still see that they are more kind of resilient towards AI, right? Specifically in creative domain. I do know that you fully embrace AI, this new technology, and you see this as a huge opportunity,
yes,
not only for businesses, but for society.
yes.
So if you could tell us a little bit more, how do you see AI actually playing role in this process?
Well, so with specific regard to video and animation, AI generates video and animation. I mean, if we go back to this guy, Disney. So he was the first one who used animation in order to tell a story. And so you have Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio and Dumbo and Jungle Book and of course Mickey Mouse, who's still a top 5 brand in the world. And he told stories through the power of animation. No one had ever done that before. But what was true for Walt Disney holds true today. When some of the biggest films in entertainment are animations. We'll just look at Frozen, for example. So people connect with these stories. Now, the thing about animation the thing about animation was if it's too big, too small, or too complex, you can't use video, because video is too literal. So if you want to show the moon coming out of the earth, so the earth gets hit with another planet, it forms the moon, you have to go to animation. If you want to show a coronavirus entering somebody's body and a macrophage is affecting it, have to go to animation. If you want to show the workings of Heathrow Airport, 700 aircraft going in, taking off, you got to go to animation. You can't use video. Well, animation it can be expensive to produce. AI takes a lot of that expense away, and you can produce really creative stories much more cost effectively, and communicate ideas in creative and relatable ways. And so who's on board with this? Well, my company is producing videos for Fortune 500 companies that are communicating ideas which are becoming more and more esoteric because they're using AI, So if you want to talk about high frequency trading in the banking system, or if you want to talk about radiographers looking at 1,000 photographs a minute in terms of mammograms, um, or you want to talk about cloud-based technology in data centers. These are all esoteric. You can't show the cloud using a video camera.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how boring that would be? There's a cloud. There's someone on the mobile phone. You can't do it, but you can do it using animation. And so I think there's going to be a natural line from where Walt was right through to the present day and out, where fantastic stories are being told, but far more cost effective. And I think this is something that NGOs and charities and uh, and organizations like United Nations, UNHCR, and uh, the penny has got to drop that they can produce this content now for a fraction of the price they used to be able to produce it for, and they can get it out to people over mobile phones now. And for a start, it can be put into every single language like that now, so you don't have any problem with language. You can get it onto mobile phones. You can do 15-second cut downs, 30-second cut downs, 2-minute longer form. And the cost of distribution is free. It goes up on Instagram. And who hasn't got a mobile phone? Everyone has a mobile phone. So yeah, it's a no-brainer.
It is, yeah. So, but I'm curious about your thoughts from the business perspective.
Yeah.
So, creating this content. So, for somebody that was part of that was their business, and it now looks that AI and technology democratizes it, makes it as easy as possible, as you said, at the fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
So, from your perspective, how is that going to impact the industry?
It nearly wiped us out. It very nearly wiped us out. When I always thought AI was going to come for the people who have Excel sheets. It's going to come for the doctors and for the lawyers. Well, not doctors so much, but lawyers and accountants and estate agents and the professional classes like that. I thought the creative industries were safe. And then along comes ChatGPT and Sora 2 years ago, and subsequent versions of Higgsfield, LTX, Seed, Nano Banana, and suddenly my entire industry is being torn to shreds by people who can prompt. People with no animation experience or training can start producing really great content, and they do. I mean, just look at your Instagram feeds, look at your LinkedIn feeds. So it absolutely terrified me when I saw this was happening, and my defense was to say, well, it's copyright issues, there are IP issues. It's never ever, big organizations are never going to go for it. Boy, was I ever wrong. So from September, I was freaking out, and I've moved the whole company now into AI positive. And it's not AI first, because I still think we need to use animation to create to create character consistency without getting into the nitty-gritty of it. But so the traditional animation is still there, but it won't be for long. And I am in the process of retraining all of our staff in AI so that they have a working knowledge of it, such that when we push the button, and we're scalable in a sense. So at the moment we're working, AI animation is about 60% of our book. And it's increasing probably 10% per month. That's the kind of scale that we've got. And in terms of the AI copyright and IP infringement, we just bought another company which is ring fenced. We call it a walled garden, so that our clients can be assured that what they're producing has no copyright or IP issues around it. I mean, we bought that company 2 weeks ago, and we've got our first big client about to come on board with it, which is really exciting. But
wow, does that
sorry, Donna.
No, it's actually fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I love how transparent and open you are. Like, about your sharing your thoughts. I love the point about being AI positive, actually recognizing, the challenges, the transformation, and actually making an active step, like you cannot live in denial, say, no, we will be more creative, like human creativity is beyond any, LLMs, etc. But you are actually actively working, like transforming your business to stay relevant.
Have
Please.
to, have to. It's in, I'd love to take your analysis of it and say, oh, well, Quint had this epiphany that somehow we have to move in. It's like, no. I have put food on the table, and I have a duty of care to my staff. We have to do it because the clients are asking for it. What if you do AI? Oh, yeah, well, that's all very well, but what if you used AI? Or you can do another 20 of these because you can use AI. And I can't sit there and go, I'm not sure if we can. I have to go, yeah, we can, and it works like this, and it's going to cost this. Realistically, a lot of what we do at the moment is consultancy. So my next meeting after this is to do consultancy with somebody, probably an advertising agency, who says our client wants this, what's possible, and then we can say, well, it's this, this, and this. Now, it would be irresponsible of me not to understand this and to provide it as part of our suite of services. And while I am absolutely in total admiration for people whose work it is to craft animation and who've learnt about it and who have a passion and a love for it, and they're out there, technology is moving along, and we're back to Walt Disney. I mean, he with Mickey Mouse, that was before sound. Part of his career was embracing the different steps of technology as it evolved, right up to the present day, where obviously Disney's being fought over at the moment, with Warner Brothers and
Yeah, I would, like I know that you're busy. But just one question. Now, I'm just thinking that like I keep you longer than I actually was asking for. No, as you mentioned that you're trying to rebuild the business around AI.
Yeah.
I do have this, like feeling that find the professionals in this specific field, like AI animation, might present a certain challenge. It's a like relatively new technology. So how do you go about it?
You mean finding professionals, or
Yeah.
well, I scour the world for people who, well, firstly, I've got a team in house which are great. Then if I really want somebody who's uh, a Jedi Knight, they're out there. They may be in Nigeria, they may be in Colombia, they may be in Singapore, and they may not be a 30-year-old man who's. It may be a 16-year-old girl who's using cracked software and is. I mean, they're out there and they have an absolute passion for it, and I love that. I love it when I see somebody sends me their portfolio and they're in, literally in cartoon, and you look at it and you go, Jesus, this is really great what they're doing here. And then I snap them up, and then we have this. We now have a portfolio of really good people. But what's going to happen, I think, is that if we go forward maybe 18 months, there's this huge democratization of the ability to produce great imagery, but it's going to be the people who can tell the stories and the people who can protect the client's IP and copyright, which is, I know it's a really boring aspect of video production, but it's really important. If you've got a brand, and your brand's the brand of Coca-Cola was but 1/3 of the equity of the entire company, the market cap of the company. So it's really important. And the people who are going to succeed are going to be the companies that can offer both the creativity and protection around a copyright and IP infringement. That's my North Star. That's where I'm heading. But at the same time, what I want to do and my passion is, if you didn't guess, is healthcare with specific reference to mental health care, because all of this tech, why, JP Morgan does another great, or Bank of America does another fantastic corporate video. Well, that's great, right? But if I can get another 10,000 kids to call up the Nakoa helpline, that's you know, that's good for the soul.
Yeah.
That's what lights me up.
Yeah, that is an amazing mission, and I really wish you best of luck in this kind of project. Quint, I really appreciate your time, you sharing your thoughts, your vision, and incredibly important mission for the UK society. It's been incredible pleasure talking to you, and I hope we could maybe have a second round one day.
I think I'd love that. It's been a real pleasure talking to you too, Dana. Really appreciate it. And you really got me thinking.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.